Poor black girl marries white pastor. 10 days later she discovers his secret. I thought I was finally saved. A poor girl like me, finding love in a man of God. But just 10 days after our wedding, I opened a drawer and found something that made my heart stop. The truth about my husband wasn't just shocking, it was dangerous. Before we dive into this unbelievable true story, don't forget to subscribe for more shocking real-life drama that will leave you speechless. Hey, I'm Tasha, born and raised in a small town in Mississippi. I've been poor all my life, scraping by with small jobs. Then came Pastor William, 45 years old man, a charming and respected white pastor from Georgia. He swept me off my feet. But I never expected the secret he was hiding, not in a million years. My name's Tasha, and I ain't never thought I'd be the girl to catch a man's eye, let alone a pastor's. I'm 25, born and raised in Willow Creek, Mississippi, where the air smells like pine and everybody knows your business. Life's been tough, scrapping by with waitressing gigs, living in a one-bedroom with a leaky roof. But then I met Pastor William, and everything changed. It was a hot July Sunday at the community outreach down at First Baptist. I was serving lemonade, sweat trickling down my neck, when this tall white man in a crisp suit walked up. Pastor William, 45, from Georgia, with gray streaks in his beard and eyes that looked right through you. He smiled, said, "Miss, you got a light about you." I blushed so hard I near dropped the picture. Me? A light? I ain't nobody special, just a poor black girl trying to get by. He kept coming back, every outreach, every church picnic. He'd talk about scripture, ask about my dreams. I told him I ain't got none, just wanted to survive. He'd laugh soft, say, "Tasha, God's got plans for you." His voice was smooth, like honey over cornbread. I started feeling something, hope, maybe love. Folks in town whispered, "A white pastor and Tasha? That's something that..." But William didn't care. He'd hold my hand right in front of everybody, like I was his queen. 3 months later, he took me to the creek at sunset. The water sparkled, and the crickets were singeing. He got down on one knee, pulled out a ring with a tiny diamond that shined brighter than anything I ever owned. "Tasha," he said, "God brought you to me. Will you be my wife?" My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear myself say, "Yes." I ain't never felt so wanted. Me, Tasha Marie, marrying a man of God? It was like a dream. The wedding was simple, in the little wooden church with creaky pews. I wore a white dress I borrowed from my cousin, my hair braided with flowers. William looked handsome in his pastor robes, smiling like I was his whole world. My mama cried in the front row. She ain't never thought I'd get out of Willow Creek. The congregation clapped, sang hymns, and threw rice as we ran out laughing. I kept thinking, this is it, Tasha. You're saved. That night, lying in his arms in a motel, I felt safe for the first time. William whispered, "We're gonna build a life, you and me." I believed him. How could I not? He was a pastor, a man who walked with God. But there was this one moment, right before I fell asleep, when I caught him staring out the window, his face all tight, like he was waiting for something. I asked, "You okay, honey?" He smiled quick, said, "Just thanking God for you." I let it go, figuring it was nothing. I should have known dreams don't come that easy, not for girls like me. But right then, with that ring on my finger and his hand in mine, I thought I'd found my miracle. 10 days later, I'd learned miracles got shadows too. I ain't never lived nowhere but Willow Creek, so moving into Pastor William's house felt like stepping into a magazine. His place was in a fancy part of town, all brick with white columns and a lawn so green it looked painted. I kept thinking, "Tasha, you don't belong here." But William would squeeze my hand and say, "This is your home now, darling Dut." I wanted to believe him, even if something felt off. The house was huge, big kitchen with shiny counters, a dining room with a chandelier, and a staircase that curved like in them old movies. William bought me dresses, elegant ones with lace and soft colors. I felt like a doll, twirling in front of the mirror, but I missed my old jeans. He'd laugh, say, You're a pastor's wife now, Tasha. Got to look the part. I nodded, trying to fit into this new life. Church was a whole other world. First Baptist was bigger than my old one, with stained glass windows and folks in suits and hats. I was the pastor's wife now, so I had to smile, shake hands, and help with the women's group. The ladies were nice, mostly, but I caught their whispers, "She's so young," or "How'd she get him?" I ignored it, focusing on William's sermons. He'd preach about love and redemption, his voice booming, and I'd feel proud to be his. But there were things that made my stomach twist. William had rooms he kept locked, his study, a spare bedroom upstairs. "Just storage, darling," he'd say when I asked. I didn't push, figuring he had his reasons. Then there were the late nights. He'd get calls and step outside, talking low so I couldn't hear. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m., and he wasn't in bed. I found him in the living room, staring at his phone, his face pale. "Work stuff," he mumbled when I asked. I let it go, but it stuck with me. I tried to keep busy. I'd cook collards, cornbread, whatever Mama taught me, and William loved it, saying, "You're spoiling me, Tasha." But sometimes he'd get quiet, like his mind was somewhere else. I'd catch him locking his desk drawer or checking the windows. "You expecting somebody?" I asked once, half joking. He smiled too quick, said, "Just keeping us safe." Safe from what? I didn't know. The town was warm but cautious. Folks smiled at me in the grocery store, but I felt their eyes, like they were waiting for me to mess up. I miss my old life sometimes, my cousins laughing on the porch, the simplicity of it. But I loved William, loved how he'd pray with me before bed, his hand warm over mine. I told myself the weird stuff was just me adjusting. I was a poor girl living a rich life now. Course it'd feel strange. 10 days into our marriage, I was still learning to be Mrs. William. I'd dust the fancy furniture, hum hymns, and dream of kids running through that big house. I thought I was building something real. But that locked room upstairs, it was calling my name, and I didn't know it'd change everything. Life as Pastor William's wife was starting to feel like a tight dress, pretty, but hard to move in. I was trying to love it, though, smelling at church, cooking supper, and ignoring the locked doors in our house. But on the 10th day of our marriage, something happened that shook me like a storm hit in Willow Creek. It was a Sunday, and First Baptist was packed. I was in my new role, greeting folks at the door, wearing a blue dress William picked out. My braids were pinned up, and I was trying to look like I belonged. William was up front, shaking hands, his pastor robes flow in. Everybody loved him. Old ladies hugged him, kids tugged at his sleeves. I felt proud, even if those locked rooms still nagged at me. Then she walked in. A woman, maybe in her 30s, Latina, with dark hair pulled tight and a black dress that didn't fit the church vibe. Her eyes were sharp, darting around like she was hunting something. She didn't smile, didn't take a program from me. Instead, she stopped right in front of me, so close I could smell her perfume, something heavy like roses gone bad. "Yo, Tasha, right," she said, her voice low, almost a hiss. I nodded, confused. "The pastor's new wife." "Yeah, that's me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My southern drawl felt too loud in that moment. She leaned in closer, her breath hot on my ear. "Be careful," she whispered. "You don't know who he really is." My heart stopped. I pulled back, looking at her, but her face was all shadows, eyes wet like she might cry. Before I could ask what she meant, she turned and slipped out the door, gone like a ghost. I stood there, my hands shaking. The church felt too loud. Hymns, chatter, William's laugh. I wanted to run after her, but my feet wouldn't move. Who was she? What did she know? I looked at William, smiling with a deacon, and my stomach twisted. Was she talking about him? I told myself she was just jealous, maybe an ex, or some bitter church lady. But her words stuck like gum on a shoe. I didn't tell William. I couldn't. He'd been so good to me, pulling me out of my old life. But that night, As we ate fried chicken I'd cooked, I kept stealing glances at him. His gray-streaked beard, his calm smile. Did they hide something? "You okay, darling?" he asked, his voice soft. I forced a smile, said, "Just tired." He patted my hand, but his eyes lingered on me a second too long. I lay awake that night, her whisper echoing in my head. William was sleeping beside me, breath and steady, but I kept thinking about that locked room upstairs, the late-night calls, the way he'd checked the windows. Was I being silly, or was something wrong? I wanted to trust him, my husband, my pastor. But that woman's voice was a crack in the dream I'd built. I didn't know it then, but that crack was about to split my whole world open. That strange woman's whisper clung to me like humidity, making it hard to breathe. I tried to push it away, focus on being William's wife, but her words, "You don't know who he really is," kept circling my mind. By day 10 of our marriage, I was jumpy, watching William closer, noticing every little thing. Then he gave me the chance I didn't know I was waiting for. William came down that morning in his suit, looking sharp as always. "Got a church retreat up in Jackson," he said, kissing my forehead. "Be gone 2 days, darling." "You'll be all right." I nodded, smiling like a good wife, but my heart was racing. 2 days alone in this big house. I could finally snoop. I felt guilty even thinking it, but that locked room upstairs was calling me louder than ever. After his car pulled out of the drive, I stood in the kitchen, hands shaking. The house was too quiet, just the hum of the fridge and creaks of old wood. I climbed the curved staircase, my bare feet cold on the hardwood. At the end of the hall was the spare bedroom, always locked. I'd asked William about it once, and he'd laughed, said, "Nothing but old junk." But I'd seen him slip in there late at night, thinking I was asleep. I checked his study first, rifling through drawers for a key. Nothing but papers, pens, and a Bible. Then I remembered his winter coat hanging in the closet. I dug in the pockets and felt something cold. A small silver key. My breath caught. This was it. The lock clicked when I turned the key, and the door swung open. The room was dark, curtains drawn tight. I flipped the light, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't junk. A desk sat in the corner, covered with photos, files, and a box of IDs. I stepped closer, heart pounding like a drum. The photos were of William, but not William. In some, he had no beard, younger, with different hair. In others, he was with women I didn't know, smiling like he smiled at me. I opened a file, and papers spilled out. Bank statements, letters, newspaper clippings. One headline read, "Man wanted for fraud in Tennessee." The picture was blurry, but those eyes, they were his. My hand shook as I picked up the IDs. 3 driver's licenses, all with William's face but different names: James Carter, Michael Reed, William Hayes. Who was my husband? Then I found a lockbox under the desk. I pried it open with a letter opener, and inside were more photos, disturbing ones. William with men in suits, handing over envelopes. One showed him burning papers in a field. My knees went weak. This wasn't just a secret. This was dangerous. I sat there, staring at the mess, my world spinning. The man I loved, the pastor who saved me, wasn't real. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. What if he came back early? What if he knew I'd found this? I shoved everything back, locked the room, and hid the key. I had to act normal, but nothing was normal no more. I was living with a stranger, and I was scared he'd find out I knew. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I locked that hidden room and slipped the key back into William's coat pocket. The house felt different now, like it was watching me. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump, thinking he'd come home early and catch me. I'd seen too much photos, IDs, that newspaper clipping calling him a fraud. My husband, Pastor William, wasn't William at all. He was a lie, and I was trapped in it. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the shiny counter, trying to make sense of it. The man I loved, who'd knelt by the creek and promised me a life, had 3 different names: James Carter, Michael Reed, William Hayes. Those IDs weren't fakes. They were too real, with his face staring back at me. The photos of him with strange women, handing over envelopes to men in suits, burning papers in a field, it all screamed trouble. And that headline, "Man Wanted for Fraud in Tennessee," kept flashing in my mind. Was he a criminal? Was he running from the law? I felt sick, like I'd swallowed something rotten. I wanted to call Mama, but what would I say? Hey, my husband's a liar, and I'm scared he might hurt me. I couldn't drag her into this. Not yet. I thought about that strange woman at church, the one who'd whispered, "You don't know who he really is." She knew something. Was she one of those women in the photos? An ex? Or someone he'd hurt? I wished I'd chased her down, begged for answers. Now I was alone, stuck in this big house with a secret that felt like a bomb ticking under my feet. I tried to act normal, cooking supper like nothing was wrong. I fried up some catfish, mashed potatoes, even baked cornbread, hoping the smell would calm me. But every bite tasted like cardboard. I kept seeing his face in those IDs, smiling like he smiled at me. How could I love a man I didn't know? How could I sleep next to him, pray with him, when he was hidden this? I wanted to believe there was an explanation, that he was a good man caught in a mix-up. But deep down, I knew better. Good men don't burn papers in fields. Good men don't lock up rooms full of lies. That night, I barely slept. I stayed in the guest room, claiming I had a headache when William called to check in. His voice was smooth as ever, saying, "Miss you, darling. Be home tomorrow." I mumbled, "Miss you too," but my throat was tight. Tomorrow, he'd be back, and I'd have to look him in the eye, pretend I didn't know he was a stranger. I stared at the ceiling, wondering who he really was. Was he a con man? A thief? Worse. The newspaper said fraud, but those photos hinted at something darker, maybe drugs, maybe worse. I didn't know, and that scared me most. By morning, I couldn't sit still. William wasn't due back till evening, so I went back to that room. I had to know more. I unlocked the door, my heart pounding so loud I thought it'd wake the neighbors. The desk was still a mess, files, photos, that box. I dug deeper, flipping through papers. One was a letter, handwritten, addressed to James. It said, "You can't keep running. They're closing in." No signature, just a smudge of ink. My stomach dropped. Who was they? The police? Someone worse. Then I found a bank statement, not in William's name but Michael Reed's, showing thousands of dollars moving in and out of accounts I'd never heard of. Another clip-in, this one from Kentucky, mentioned a traveling preacher who'd swindled a church out to donations. The description fit William, tall, charming, gray-streaked beard. I sank to the floor, clutching the papers. He wasn't just a fraud. He was a man on the run, changing names like shirts, leaving a trail of lies. And I was his latest cover, the poor black girl he'd married to look like a saint. I thought back to our wedding, how he'd smiled in that church, promising to love me forever. Was it all a show? Did he pick me 'cause I was naive? 'Cause nobody'd believe a girl like me if I spoke up? My eyes stung, but I wouldn't cry. Not yet. I had to figure out what to do. Run. Confront him? Call the police? But what if he had friends in high places? Those men in the photos didn't look like small-time crooks. What if they came for me? I remembered something Mama used to say, "Truth don't stay buried, Tasha. It always claws its way out." I had to find the truth, all of it. I grabbed a notebook from the kitchen and started writing down everything. Names, dates, account numbers. I took pictures with my phone, my hand shaking so bad the screen blurred. If William was dangerous, I needed proof. If he wasn't, I needed to know why he'd lied. Either way, I wasn't gonna be his fool no more. As the sun set, I locked the room again, hid the key, and cleaned up like nothing happened. William's car pulled into the drive right on time. I heard his boots on the porch, his key in the door. "Tasha, I'm home," he called, voice warm like always. I forced a smile, my heart racing as he walked in, smiling with those eyes I used to trust. Missed you, darling, he said, pulling me into a hug. I hugged him back, but my skin crawled. He didn't know I'd seen his secrets, didn't know I was planning my next move. That night, we ate supper, and I played the part, laughing at his stories, nodding at his plans for the church. But inside, I was screaming. I kept seeing those IDs, that letter, those photos. Who was this man sitting across from me? Was he planning to run again, take me with him, or leave me behind? I didn't know, but I knew one thing. I wasn't safe. Not here, not with him. I went to bed early, claiming I was tired. William kissed my forehead, said, "Sleep well, my love." I lay there, eyes open, listening to his steady breathing. The man I'd married was a ghost, and I was living with a shadow. Tomorrow, I'd start digging deeper, maybe find that strange woman, maybe call the police. But for now, I had to survive the night, pretending I still loved a man who didn't exist. I couldn't keep living a lie, sleeping next to a man who wasn't who he said he was. William's secrets, those IDs, photos, that fraud headline, were burning a hole in my heart. I had proof on my phone, pictures of his papers, but I was scared. What if he found out? I had to get out of this house, away from him, before he realized I knew. The next morning, William was preaching at First Baptist. I packed a small bag, some clothes, my phone, the notebook with his fake names. My hands shook as I zipped it up, hiding it under the bed. I acted normal, kissing him goodbye, smiling like my world wasn't falling apart. "See you at church, darling," he said, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, praying he couldn't hear my heart pounding. At church, I sat in the front pew, clutching my purse. William's sermon was about trust, his voice booming like nothing was wrong. I wanted to scream, "You're a liar," but I stayed quiet, planning. I'd confront him tonight, then go to the police. I couldn't let him hurt nobody else. But when I got home, things went wrong fast. William was in the kitchen, holding the silver key to the locked room. "Tasha," he said, voice low, "you been in my study?" My blood went cold. He knew. I tried to lie, saying, "No, honey," but my voice cracked. His eyes darkened, and he stepped closer. "Don't play with me," he growled, grabbing my arm. I yanked free, heart racing. "I know everything," I said, voice shaking. "James, Michael, whoever you are." His face twisted, and he lunged. I screamed, dodging him, and ran for the door. He caught my wrist, pulling me back. "You don't understand," he hissed, but I kicked hard, hitting his shin. He stumbled, and I bolted outside, bare feet slapping the pavement. I ran to my cousin's house, banging on her door. She let me in, eyes wide. "Tasha, what's wrong?" I spilled everything, crying, showing her the photos on my phone. We called the police. They came quick, listening as I told him about William's lies, the fraud, the IDs. I handed over my notebook, my proof. They said they'd been tracking a conman matching his description, wanted in 3 states. The next day, they arrested him right in the middle of his sermon. The church gasped as cops cuffed him, his pastor robes dragged in. He looked at me, eyes full of hate, but I stood tall. Word spread fast. News crews showed up, calling me a hero for turning him in. I didn't feel like one, just a girl who wanted love and got lies. I moved back with Mama, rebuilding my life. I started telling my story online, warning others about men like him. Folks listened, sharing my posts, calling me brave. I ain't brave, just stronger than I knew. Willow Creek don't feel so small no more, and neither do I.